Hello everyone, my name is Kyle Wanner. I'm the Executive Director for the North Dakota Aeronautics Commission, and I want to welcome you to the 2019 Upper Midwest Aviation Symposium and our annual Aerial Applicator Safety Meeting, which you're in attendance today. Just for everybody here, I want to remind you that we're actually videoing the presentations today for those who are unable to make it, who can then watch it online. So if you have any questions to the speakers, I want the speakers to know, hey, if just a reminder, if you can reiterate or re-explain the question into this microphone so the people on the video can hear what the question was and then give the response. That's the benefit of everybody watching online. And so for those present here and for those watching online, this will help fulfill your annual requirement to be an aerial applicator in the state of North Dakota, to be licensed to the Aeronautics Commission. The other way to get that safety requirement is to attend a PASS program, and there's multiple PASS programs around the country. Just last week I had the opportunity to attend this Tri-State Convention in Sioux Falls. It was a great convention. Hope in the future, if you have an opportunity to attend that you do. The PASS programs are absolutely excellent as well, and so I really highly recommend your attendance at those events. So with that, so we have some great speakers in attendance today, and to start out, we're going to hear an update from the Department of Agriculture with Jeremy Lean here. So let's give Jeremy a round of applause.
Thank you. Yep. I'll go ahead and get started here so I can keep you guys on schedule. So Worker Protection Standard, that's what WPS stands for. In 2017, they switched that to handlers must be 18, early entry workers must be 18, posting no entry signs if the restricted entry interval is over 48 hours, and then doing annual training. What that is a certified applicator using EPA-approved materials conducting the training, and then just record who's there, the time, date, place. Your record forms, I'm sure this isn't anything new to a lot of you. Make sure they're filled out within 24 hours of the application. Keep them for 3 years. And everything that's on this slide and the next slide has to be in your record form. You can create your own record form. We also have templates on our website. If you go, just Google North Dakota Department of Agriculture, and there'll be a Forms tab, scroll down to Pesticides, and then you can print that off. Make sure you're putting your start and stop times and using AM, PM, or military time. If you just if you leave that off, then you end up owning those whole 12 hours. So if somebody files a complaint and they say you were out there at say 8 o'clock and you were out at 8 in the morning, they say it was 8 in the evening, and the winds were a lot more than 8 in the evening, then you would end up owning those whole 12 hours. So I think I said keep them for 3 years, fill out within 24 hours. Environmental hazards, that's a portion of the label that is going to tell you anything regarding bees or water, and both of those are high profile issues that receive a lot of attention nationally and locally as well. If you do have something, and I'm not sure anything that you'd be spraying would be labeled to be used over water. But if there is something that is labeled to be used over water, before you make that application, contact the North Dakota Department of Health. And there's a one-page notice of intent form that you fill out. I suppose I'm standing right in your guys' way. And it's basically like a who, what, when, where, and why for the application. That's probably more along the lines of vector control, and there is maybe cattail control, some things like that. But here's an example of a label, Lors ban, restricted use at the top. Here's environmental hazards. Do not apply directly to water to areas where surface water is present. Most of your labels are going to have that on there. Then at the bottom, this product is highly toxic to bees exposed to direct treatment or residues on blooming crops or weeds. Do not apply this product or allow it to drift to blooming crops or weeds if bees are visiting the treatment area. So what we've been telling people in the past is we have a bee map, and I got it in a few slides here. That's one source you can utilize. The other thing, if you do happen to see bees bouncing off your windshield, I suppose, then you could safely assume they're visiting the treatment area. But we certainly know you're not going to drive out, scout the field first, and then drive back and get in your plane and fly out. But you know, just do your best. This is just a buffer zones for that Lors band label. For aerial, 150 feet around above listed aquatic areas. And each label will be different, so you have to read the label you're applying. But now that would be considered surface water. You have a low spot in a field, fills up after a rain, and can be gone in a day or two. While it's there, it's still considered surface water. EPA was sued, and I think it was 2009, and that became a violation of the Clean Water Act. And so anybody that sees that can litigate against you. So if there's somebody driving down the road, they see that and makes them unhappy, I guess you'd say, you could face potential litigation for violating the Clean Water Act. So if there is any amount of water, avoid it. Now atrazine, this is one that really want to draw attention to. It's a restricted use due to the ground and surface water concerns. And we've been doing water sampling since 2013, and it's 30 sites, rivers and streams around the state. Nothing high tech. You go to a bridge, lower a sterile bottle into the river, pull it up and send it off to be tested. So from 2013 to 2017, it's been found in 859 out of the 948 samples collected. That's a 92% finding. Found at 25 times levels that would impact aquatic plants over a long period of time. That's 1 part per billion. The high levels are usually found for short periods of time, but still it's not a good thing. And levels above the lowest human health benchmarks were both exceeded in 2016 and 2017. That is 3 parts per billion, and so in 2016 it was 5.3 parts per billion and 7.6 parts per billion in 2017. So it's not getting better. EPA is aware of it, and we're not the only state that has issues. Atrazine's undergoing a registration review, and so that's what I've been told about a 5-year process, and I think we're a couple years into it, 2 or 3 years into it. What happens, who knows? Very likely could be further restrictions regarding the use of atrazine. Whether they're going to cancel the whole product, of course they could. I don't, who knows? I can't say one way or the other, but 11 significant detections ranging from that 1 to 7.6 parts per billion. I covered a lot of that already, so I'll just skip over. The most commonly detected pesticides included atrazine, 2,4-D, bentazone, metachlor, prometon, acetochlor, and tebuconazole, I think, if I said that right. Probably mispronounced most of them, but most of these are present in large number of samples, but they're at the low levels. 2016 and 2017 were found at or above levels of concern were both atrazine, metachlor, acetochlor, malathion, clopyrifos, and metylsulfuron methyl. And then malathion, clopyrifos, and metylsulfuron methyl were rarely detected, but when they were, the levels were pretty significant. So the stuff is in our water. Make sure if you're spraying, you'd have to almost find out from NRCS, so I don't know, it's going to be fairly tricky, I suppose, with the logistics, but a lot of labels, and I'm sure atrazine says it on there, will say something to the effect, if soils are permeable and the depth of groundwater is 30 feet or less, do not apply. And so say you got sandy soils, depth of groundwater shallow, you cannot use that product. So it's just something to be aware of. And NRCS should have those soil information and depth of groundwater. And I covered most of that already with EPA aware of it, and it's undergoing the registration review. So here's the interactive B map. They've changed it. Is this the 2nd or 3rd year? I can't remember. I lose track of time, but now applicators can create an account and set up watch areas. Same thing with beekeepers, so they'll be alerted if there's an application in a certain area and vice versa. If somebody puts a hive up, then if you signed up, you'd be notified. They can renew their existing license and add and edit hive locations, etc. They also have vineyards and organic on there. They're not required to list their locations, but a lot of them do it, so it doesn't hurt to check it out. Towers are on there, but I'm not sure how often those are updated, so we were just talking about that before the meeting, so that's something we'll have to check into. So you'd click on one of these dots, you zoom in, and you get the contact information of the beekeeper to pop up. So potentially if they're, say you're spraying like Lorsban, you could ask if they'd be willing to move their hives, cover them, something along those lines. Hopefully something can be worked out. Moving on to SafeSend, and getting close to the end here. That's a non-regulatory program. Most of you are familiar with it, I'm sure. It's a pesticide collection program. So if you have any old chemicals unused, it's banned. Say you got a label that's ripped off, whatever the case is. If that is the case, just write SafeSend on it. Take a magic marker, write it on. And if the inspector shows up to do a walkthrough or inspection, they see that, they'll know you plan on discarding it at SafeSend. Stay in your vehicle. It's free. Don't bring in leaking containers, leaving a trail down the road or into the DOT. I've seen that a few times. Repack it into something that won't leak, basically, or give me a call. If it's over 1,000 pounds, give me a call a week in advance and just let me know what site you're going to and approximately how much you have. Like 3 shuttles, it's going to be roughly 4,500 pounds. That's all I need to know. And I'm going to go to Dickinson or whatever. I don't need to know your name, and we don't have to have an exact weight. It's just so that the contractor has enough trucks to haul it away at the end of the collection. Pesticides only. That's herbicides, insecticides, fungicides. No rinseate, empty containers. Surfactants and adjuvants are not pesticides, and no fertilizers. Collection times are from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. 8 core sites, same every year. And then 4 sites that alternate every other year. They'll be the same every other year, and even and odd. So those are the core sites. Those shouldn't change, provided the DOT's not doing construction or something and doesn't want us there, but other than that, they should stay the same. These are the odd year rotating sites. And the even year rotating sites. I think that's it. Is there any questions over that? I try to get through it fairly quickly.
Any questions for Jeremiah?
All right. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for that update. And I hope all of you are going onto their website to look at the beehives and the vineyards and the towers and different things like that around the state. I hope that's very helpful for you. Like Jeremiah just mentioned about the towers, I'd highly recommend looking at the Aeronautics Commission's website first if you're looking for tower information, because that is the most up to date. It is a requirement that Met Tower operators put their locations on our website, and then every once in a while we have it uploaded onto the Department of Agriculture's website, but because it's not updated all the time, the most accurate version of that is on the Aeronautics Commission website under the maps page. And so I highly recommend looking at that, but I can't speak enough to the bees map either. I think it's just absolutely incredible what they've done to help with those issues as well, so keep using that. Our next topic is kind of a hot button topic around the state. It has been the last couple of years. I know as you're flying around the state, as you're looking at articles online, you're probably hearing a lot about unmanned aircraft issues and topics. And so here with us today we have Jakey Stoltz from the Northern Plains Unmanned Aircraft Systems Test Site in the state to give us an update on what's happening in the unmanned world. So let's give Jakey a round of applause here. Perfect. Yeah. This is the.
There we go. Yeah. All right. Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kyle, for having me. Like Kyle said, Jakey Stoltz, I'm Director of Operations at the Northern Plains U.S. Test Site. We are based up in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Actually at UND, the campus there. And we're one of 7 FAA-designated test sites. Not many years ago, it was one of 6, but then they added New Mexico as the 7th, so now we're one of 7. And our primary objective is to help the FAA conduct aeronautical research, UAS research, and figure out how to integrate UAS into the National Airspace System safely, effectively, and without impacting the existing operations going on. So, oops, double click there. Okay, so just wanted to give a really quick recap of 2018, and then we'll kind of touch on some upcoming UAS activities for the year here. So we had a really successful year, a couple significant firsts with beyond visual line of sight operations, both small and large UAS. We had our first operation over a crowd of human beings, so down at a NDSU and SDSU football game. We operated over the tailgating event there. We've installed some beyond visual line of sight equipment in Hillsboro, kind of on I-29 there. And sorry, I should have probably spelled the acronym out, but BVLOS is beyond visual line of sight, and meaning you're flying your UAS beyond your eyesight of the pilot. So, and then we continued operations of the Elbit Hermes 450. Last year was out of Castleton for the first time. The previous 2 years we'd been in Hillsboro, but since they had their runway resurfacing and construction going on, they moved down to Castleton. So I got a couple more notes on that Elbit one here later. But so what's coming up in 2019 that could impact ag sprayers in North Dakota and around the country? So kind of a list of projects here. I'm going to go in depth on about 2 of them that are kind of the most applicable here. But just some of the other ones, just for kind of a situational awareness on where things are going. The FAA Unmanned Traffic Management Pilot Program at the top there, that is the FAA's first take at an unmanned traffic management program. So the past about 4 years, NASA's been developing this system. Every year or so, we've tested it with them, worked through some of the bugs, and then they go and develop some more and test some more, etc. So finally, they're at a point where they're transitioning certain pieces of it over to the FAA, and the FAA has a team, the research transition team, in place to kind of bring that research over and then figure out how to implement it in their systems, in the air traffic organizations and the FSDOs and just all these different parts. So this spring, they're going to be testing some of the first pieces of that, and kind of initially what it's going to be, at least, is the concept is advanced operations would voluntarily share they're calling it kind of their intent. So, maybe a boundary of their operational area, some basic information about time and altitude. They would share this to some server at the FAA, and then this server would share that information across to all the other parties, other UAS operators, potentially, manned traffic. There may be some public portal or something that you can access to see this stuff. So that's kind of exciting that the FAA is starting to take some of this and kind of run with it, and maybe we'll see some implementation of it, next year or the coming years. I'm going to skip Hubnet and Hermes. I got a few more slides on those here in a second, but then Integration Pilot Program. So this one is looking at advanced operations, so things like night operations, operations over people, beyond visual line of sight, of course, is in there. And this is all small UAS, kind of low altitude stuff. So how we're involved with that right now, at least, is kind of the operations at the tailgating event. So, and the reason that's significant is the FAA is, understands there's risk involved with flying over people, and if UAS crashes, there's a risk there of hurting somebody, killing somebody, etc. So we're looking at different techniques of mitigating that risk. Do you lower the weight of the aircraft, so low that even if it hit you, there's just no possible way it could seriously injure you. They're using things like parachutes to do that, and even aircraft that just literally break apart when they fall. So they're like snapped together magnetically and really light. So they're looking at ways of doing that. Also just looking at likelihoods. So it's one thing to be flying over the tailgating event at the Fargo Dome, but it's another thing to be flying maybe down kind of Bismarck Expressway where it's just businesses. There's not a lot of people out moving around, et cetera. So trying to understand what these environments actually are that we're operating in, and so on. So that program is looking at kind of those advanced ops. And then at the bottom, I always like to throw this one in there just because it's so futuristic and it's still many, many years away, but urban air mobility, so flying cars, concepts like that. So we are involved with some of that research. It's a really, really, really hot kind of part of the UAS industry right now. Just about every major aircraft manufacturer out there is working on this. Boeing, Airbus, Embraer, you name it. They're working on prototypes of these vehicles. And then there's all these Silicon Valley startup companies that are working on it. So it's a really exciting thing to see. But like I said, probably 5, 10, 20 years out before it's a reality. So I'm going to I got a couple slides a little bit more in detail on 2 of these projects that I think impact your guys' operations the most here this coming summer. So Hubnet is one of those. That stands for Harris Unmanned Beyond Visual Line of Sight Network. So this is installed basically along I-29. There's a tower in Buxton. There's a tower plus a radar in Hillsboro. Any of you guys based out of Hillsboro by chance or in the area? Nope. Okay. And then there's another tower down in Gardner. So they're kind of spaced out equidistant down I-29 between Grand Forks and Fargo. And the idea here is to provide ground infrastructure for beyond visual line of sight operations. So that would be command and control links, similar to your cell phone. So the concept is the aircraft will take off anywhere in that corridor, and then it can fly anywhere in that corridor and just talk to the nearest tower, and you'd kind of have full coverage. And the pilot could be sitting, anywhere that they can connect into that tower. So there'll be a command and control service there, and then also, just as importantly, a surveillance service. So we're using the radar in Grand Forks, the terminal radar, the radar in Fargo, the terminal radar there. And those 2 radars are great, but there's kind of a dead zone in the middle at really low altitudes, which is where we're most interested in operating here. So Harris installed a radar in Hillsboro. So if you ever drive by Hillsboro now, you'll see a little spinning radar there on the ramp. And that radar is there to essentially cover the gap between Fargo and Grand Forks at those really low altitudes. So the idea is we want to be able to see everything in this corridor kind of down I-29. And then also we'll augment that with ADS-B in. So between the radar and the ADS-B, we should be able to see all manned aircraft in that corridor, which is then important because then we can avoid you. So that's the ultimate goal. The picture you see on the left is kind of what displays that information. So there'll be somebody sitting there, and they'll see the UAS kind of moving along, and then they'll see the other aircraft that are either getting hit with the primary radar or ADS-B if you're equipped, and then we can make decisions, maneuvers if need be, if you are converging with us or getting close and so on. So essentially the hardware is installed. We've been doing initial testing here for the last 2 months. Haven't really gotten to the flying part yet, but we got a lot of work to do for determining reliabilities of these to make sure we can see all the traffic, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of testing, a lot of research to be done yet, but we hope it's operational by this summer, give or take. So, and then this is just a picture of the aircraft that we are planning to operate on that network. So this is a little bigger aircraft. It sits about 3 feet tall, and I think it has something like a 7-foot span all the way across. But kind of the unique thing about it is at the bottom, it's got a gas generator on it. So that thing actually powers the aircraft in flight. It lasts about 1.5 to 2 hours. So kind of our end goal, our ultimate objective here is by the end of the summer, we'd like to be able to fly from about Thompson to Argusville nonstop all the way down the network. So anyways, just that's going to impact, well, it won't impact you guys, I won't say that, but we'll be in the same airspace as some of you guys if you're spraying out on the east side of the state. But as always, we will see you, we'll avoid you, and hopefully you never know we're there. But okay, so then another project that will impact you guys if you're on the eastern side of the state again is the Hermes 450. So like I said, this has been in Hillsborough 2 years prior to last year, and then Castleton last year. Just got some kind of statistics, a little bit of information on how last year went. We had a really great year, essentially doubled the flight time that we had the previous 2 years. It started out a little slow. There was some education that needed to be done at the airports, and just helping them understand how we were going to impact them or how we weren't going to impact them, and ultimately got started out of there. Flew about 87 hours. What I do want to highlight is kind of the bottom three things. So we had in the traffic pattern we had 20, and I'm calling them encounters, but that doesn't have any sort of negative connotation with it. We operated in the pattern 20 times with manned aircraft, whether it was an egg sprayer or just a general aviation pilot flying in and out of there. So I think about 11 of those times I didn't put on there, but about half of them we essentially either were able to just wait on the ramp and let them do their thing, or we were able to wait in airborne just outside the traffic pattern, and again just kind of wait till the manned aircraft was gone. But about half of them we just had to do real-time coordination, just like any other two aircraft would. So talking on the radio on CTAF, calling out where we're at in the pattern or where we're at on the taxi surfaces, and just coordinating. So we thought it really smoothed out, and we just kind of became part of normal aviation life there. So, and then 7 times we had the arresting cables. So for those of you that don't know, this Hermes doesn't have brakes, so we actually have to put a set of cables on the runway when it takes off and lands. And the cable is only about a 1/4 inch rope, just fabric rope. And then there's some rubber washers on there, which are about 1 inch to 2 inches, that just hold the rope off the runway a little bit so the hook can grab it. There's been a lot of, just kind of, unsure, can I roll over it? Is it going to damage my tires or so on? We've fielded a lot of questions about that over the years. And hopefully, after seeing it last year, 7 times they were deployed and aircraft just rolled over them with no effects. So we're hoping we can kind of put some of that unease to rest with that. And outside of the airport environment, there was no encounters with manned aircraft at all once we were kind of out and at altitude. So again, we thought we had a really successful year. We thought it just kind of became part of operations at Castleton, and all things are pointing to we'll be back there this year for more operations. So okay, so I just want to kind of share maybe a couple observations now that we've seen in the last year that really impact you guys. There's starting to become a term that the FAA and industry is coining infrastructure shadowing. And so what that means is for some of this like linear infrastructure, so like power lines, transmission lines, pipeline, not so much, but things that have some height to them, we can operate UAS, right above that. So you can imagine like a 100-foot tall transmission line. We'll operate maybe another 100 feet above that and just fly directly down the line, imaging it. This infrastructure shadowing comes in where we've kind of determined that if we see a manned aircraft coming, one of our safest maneuvers is to sidestep the line and basically descend to tower height. And so we've kind of been pitching this idea back and forth with the FAA, but it seems like it's a pretty good idea. You know, just basically get to tower height, and then it makes sense that there should be no manned aircraft there, you know, right next to a tower at that height. So we had, you know, we thought this was a great idea, like we'll never see aircraft there. And then I'm gonna see if this video plays here. And then we were out in Denver. So this is in Denver, by the way, but the first week we were there, we saw this. And so you guys are probably thinking like, yeah, that happens all the time. Well, what's important there is that it was below 500 feet of the line. So, you know, 91, 119C, I got to maintain 500 feet when transiting. Now, we do recognize that there's a difference between transiting and spraying, so we'll get into that. But when transiting, you know, this 500 feet rule is important. So we know they were below 500 feet because we had radar coverage on them. We were in a mode C veil. So, you know, not here to just blow bells and whistles about it all. I just want to make you guys aware that this is going to probably become a more common thing where UAS are operating over structures and kind of under the assumption that you guys are operating at 500 feet above those structures. So when you're not, I think that puts kind of everybody at risk. So just wanted to kind of bring up that, you know, maintain your 500 feet, right? Now, when you're spraying, that's a totally different ballgame. So that's when our surveillance starts to become important so that we can see when that's happening and avoid you guys. So it'll kind of go both ways, of course. But. All right, and then just kind of some last general tips. Keep monitoring NOTAMs. We do post NOTAMs for all the operations that we do in the state at least. Not all the commercial operators have to. But I think generally when things are at higher altitudes or more at risk for manned aircraft, NOTAMs will be out there. So do monitor those. Radio communication, when we're in the vicinity of airports, we, at the very minimum, we're listening. We're not always transmitting because I don't think it's always a good idea for UAS pilots to be transmitting on those. It's always our responsibility to get out of your way when everybody's following the regulations. So we're listening, so if you're talking, that just gives us a better chance of hearing you and getting out of your way. You know, thirdly, again, just the regulations and kind of best practices are important because it helps. We're much better able to tailor our ops around you guys when you're predictable. And I don't mean that by saying like, you know, you're flying at 10 a.m. every morning. I just mean, you know, left-hand traffic patterns, that's kind of standard practice, so we know that's coming, but when you do it a different way, then we're kind of scrambling at the last minute to adjust for that. So predictable just meaning, you know, best practices, kind of far-aim stuff. And then, you know, again, the onus is still on the UAS pilot to see and avoid you guys. So that's not going to change anytime soon. Don't worry about that. We're developing technology or researching to make that better and better so we can enable ourselves to do more ops. But that's pretty much always going to be the case is where we're avoiding you. So so that's really the end of mine. Any questions?
I just have a couple things to bring up. When you guys worked at Castleton, I remember you worked very closely with the airport management. Mm-hmm. And if I'm correct in remembering, regular traffic was on left-hand traffic pattern there, and you guys did a right-hand traffic to stay out of the way, or how did that end up?
Yeah, so Jay is just wondering if we followed left-hand or kind of an opposite of manned traffic. We acted exactly like a manned aircraft.
So you stayed left traffic. I know that was a discussion, and I kind of
yeah,
a lot of it
I think what you're referring to. So we always did left traffic when we were in the airport. The one thing that we would use was we just called it like a holding box that was about 3 miles west of the airport. So that was our spot that we would go to if we knew there was like somebody in the pattern or if there was just going to be an encounter. We would just stay in that box outside the traffic pattern until kind of the airport was clear, and then we would come in. So maybe that's what you're talking about.
Guys here, what you got to remember, this is something we'll discuss when I get up there, but you have the given latitude in part 137 that you can do right-hand traffic or you can do other than standard traffic pattern. Unfortunately, that's only if there's no other traffic in the area. And that agreement has to be in some fashion in writing. It doesn't have to be in writing, but it can be a gentleman's agreement. If that gentleman's accessible to the FAA, in other words, he didn't retire, he didn't die, something on the way. So that's why we have you put it in writing, so that if we come up and ask you about it, you can say, yes, I do. I can do right-hand traffic pattern. But if there's other aircraft, and some of these are now N-numbered aircraft that are in the traffic pattern out there, guess what? You're stuck with left-hand traffic. You can't just do a right-hand traffic because it's a drone. You're stuck just as if it's a guy, a student out there in a Piper Cherokee. So you got to make sure that you're working with these guys just the same as you do any other pilot. The other thing I wanted to bring up too, when you're in here, we just got through this last week in our Gaza meeting, is that the operations over crowds within a very short time here. They're setting it up right now. They've got a lot of the information they need. But you're going to find that drone operators are going to have to prove size of their drone by category. So if you have a category, what they're categorizing, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've probably seen this more than
it's a proposed rule anyways, so who knows. But
it's category A through Delta. So if you have a category A aircraft that hits somebody, it doesn't even cause a scratch. Well, maybe a category B doesn't cause a scratch. Maybe a category C causes a broken bone, and D might kill them. So they have to prove by size and weight and style and whatever, whether they can fly over the crowd. So we're doing everything we can that way to protect the public with flying over them too. So there's a lot of stuff coming down the pike right now. It's changing very rapidly, like you're saying. So
absolutely.
Just to remind you, if you guys could pass that mic around when...
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry, it's kind of on a wire, but yeah.
Hopefully I talk loud. That might pick me up.
I think we got a little bit of it. So.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Awesome. Anyone else?
Any other questions? This is your time for unmanned aircraft issues or concerns or comments that you have. There you go.
I'm an unmanned operator, and we've flown in 31 states and 6 countries, and run into a few. But the biggest thing is the simple communication when you get to a region, calling the local airport, letting them know, following our rules. This is our 4th year of operations, and we've had a few near closer calls than we'd like, but our incidents haven't had anything really to do with airplanes. It's been technical problems with as well. So, I think communications both ways always is the biggest thing.
Can we summarize that real quick?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. For the online guys, basically communication is key. So Tommy was saying when they go to a new area, they're making calls to airports, trying to, coordinate, find out what's going on, etc. And we appreciate it back. So communication.
Anything else?
I'll just comment because I think the commercial operations are far safer than what we would call the hobbyist unmanned. So that's probably where I think most of my concerns come in.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, that comment was just hobbyists generally perhaps being more of a risk than the commercial operators. And I would say I agree, and I think that's why we're seeing some of the hobbyist rules kind of being affected now with the latest reauthorization. So it'll be interesting to see how that progresses, but I'm guessing over time the hobbyists will kind of just start to be part of just Part 107 and that rule set anyways. So yeah, agreed though.
All right. Help me thank Jakey. Thank you so much. And for everybody here too, just so that they know, Aeronautics Mission, myself, I actually serve on the authority that oversees the unmanned systems test site in the state. So I work with Jakey and the rest of the staff. They do an absolutely great job working to help integrate drones in a safe way into the national airspace system, but they want to do so in a way that does not negatively impact any operations that we have in the state, especially our aerial applicators. And so we're going to continue to work with them in that way. And if you have any issues, concerns, obviously you can work directly with the test site, but I want you to know that I'm always here as well for you to reach out to. I'd love to hear any concerns or issues that you have. Please feel free to contact us if any issues arise. And with that, we're going to move into our last speaker of the evening, Jay Flowers from the FSDO office. And I do want to mention, too, on unmanned aircraft, if you have issues, this is the guy to be talking to as well. So make sure to contact the FSDO if you have serious issues, but obviously we want to know at the Aeronautics Mission, too, as we work with unmanned aircraft in the States. So let's give Jay a hand.
Thank you.
Let's see if we can switch you over here.
Well, one of the things, too, that you guys should know that we're doing more and more to help you out. And that is that if you see, you know, when this whole thing started up about 4 or 5 years ago, one of the things we ask that you do is if you see anything, report it, right? Well, the preponderance of evidence is what gets things moving. There's been more and more sightings, drone issues. You hear them all the time. We're hearing about, you know, drone near miss on an airliner, things of that nature. When you guys are out there working your ag stuff and you see a drone in your area, and I guess what I'd like you to do, if he's not supposed to be there, report it to the FSDO. Yes, will we get out in there in time? No. But what is happening within the FAA, and we were given this, basically Washington is starting this effective immediately, more or less. They are going to be taking collectively from every office, when you have, say, 5 complaints, they are making the office, or they're having the office go out to actually do surveillance. You know, and you say, well, on what? Well, okay, one of the things they could possibly do is that if they have several sightings over a given area, well, then if there's 5 sightings, then the office is going to be expected to go out there, put on their binoculars, and start watching for drones. And we're helping the office do that by doing scene assessment stuff. In other words, was the drone there because there's a concert there a lot? Is there something going on in the park that brings these drones out? Was it parades? Is it a gathering type? So we're looking at all that information and data. But unless we get those complaints called into us, we're really not appropriated the funds to go out and take a look at it. So, you know, I guess it's the old thing is that if there aren't any numbers in the system that tell us we need to do it, they're not going to do it. So when you see these things or see stuff out there, it's not supposed to be there with drones, please report it. So let's see here. Yeah, where is that? We'll just go up here. Did it come up? Yeah, it did. Okay, very good. All right, so I'm not going to go through all this stuff. A lot of this stuff is, of course, what we did down at the Tri-State. I don't need to tell you about restrooms and all that because hopefully you figured that out by now. So. But a lot of what we're looking at is the national data. I want to briefly bring that up for you guys for the Part 137 so you know what's going on around the country. We'll talk about the case review of some simple accidents that have been happening around the state. The other thing we'll talk about is some weight and balance requirements, and we've got a guest speaker on that. It's going to talk a little bit about that with you. Some regulatory refresher stuff, some op specs. It's amazing how many guys around the country, especially southern region, they don't even issue op specs. And it's like, well, not if you come to North Dakota. You got to have it. It's countrywide. So it's amazing how many people still don't have it, and then any questions you might have. So with that said, I was going to use this screen, but evidently it won't fold, huh? Okay. So anyway, nationally, the accidents that are out there. There's been 20 in the last... It's not working here, yeah. I was going to use it as my primary monitor, but it's not doing that. One moment for technical. There we go. That works. Okay. So we've got a new tool that we're playing with here, and this is basically looks at the NTSB database.
which we found out now is updated every 30 days. So we're pretty current with this. It used to be we had to go back 2 years to find out what's going on for accidents. But in North Dakota, we've had basically 20 accidents is all in the last 8 years, which is pretty good when you consider the amount of work that you guys do. So we have a good bunch of professionals out there. What we do have to look at, though, and this is something that we continue to look at, is just exactly, where are we screwing up? Where are the accidents at? What can we do to improve this? So if we look at it, gee whiz, looks like July is a peak month. I can't imagine why that would be. I was even surprised when I was digging through the data. There's actually times in there in November, December, January. Those guys hopefully have been down south. Either that or they're trying to kill some mosquitoes under 4 foot of snow. So, but you can see that our peak months start basically in June and go through the end of August. And you guys know that because that's when you're busy. That's when you're out flying. What we typically found were the issues. One of them was maneuvering. The other one was takeoff. And we tried to break that down. Personnel issues was one where the personnel issues came in. And I guess this is something I really had to, work hard with when we started looking at NTSB data is that there is more than one causal factor for every accident. It's never as simple as the airman screwed up or the engine quit or something happened. We can take a look at accidents and you'll typically find anywhere from 4 to 5 causal factors. And it may be everything from training, it may be lack of training, it may be wind combined with the training. There might be a lot of things that help cause this accident. So you'll see the numbers are quite a bit larger than the 20 that were out there. But personnel issues, more so than anything, what it had to do with was training issues. Task performance, again, basically down to training. Okay, we can get the job done, but are we doing it at maximum performance? I said one of the things we talked about, and we'll talk a little bit more about training in here, but, you guys think about it. You fly for what, 4 to 6 months out of the year? And then pretty much you're done for the rest of the year. Unless you fly Part 91, 135, and you're doing more, in which case, if you're doing 135, you're probably doing some more training because you're required to do it twice a year under 135. But if you're just doing Part 137 work, that means basically once you're done spraying, well, we're going to go down south for 6 months. I'll see you next spring. So we don't have the proficiency level that we need. And so what we're finding in a lot of our stuff is when we're going through it, is that we need to do better. We need to train. And unfortunately, that's something that we don't do enough of in any industry, really, except the Part 121 industry. Use of equipment was a big one. Just basically, you got to ask yourself, how many times have you got in an airplane that says, I wonder what if? How many of you guys know 100% if you pull the dump handle, what's going to happen to that airplane? Not one hand went up. I'm sorry, but that's scary. yeah, Andy, you should know. So that's what it boils down to is, if you aren't sure what this airplane's going to do, okay, so throw 100 gallons in it, pull the handle before you go out and spray for the season. Get comfortable with the airplane. And that's some of the things we'll talk about as we go through here. Aircraft control is another one, and that has to do with crosswind or takeoff, that type of scenario, dumping the load, that type of thing. Of course, it has to do with pilot. But a long story short is it gets down to the maneuvering and takeoff issues that are there. A lot of it could be corrected with training. And so you're going to hear us talk a lot more about training through this session. So with that said, okay, the accidents last year, and this is what they found wrong. Airspeed not attained. Now, I can't imagine you guys not attaining airspeed. When you get to the end of the run, what do? You turn around with a full load, you're coming around nice and slow and at a high bank angle, you come back in and you start spraying again. Well, the issue there is you've probably been living on the edge of the world for so long that when you get up there, if that thing actually did unhook, how many of you have gone out in the last, say, 2-3 years and actually practiced a full stall and recovery in an aircraft? Anybody? One guy. Either that or the rest, you don't remember what it was. So, really, we should be going out and doing full stall practice in that aircraft. I mean, what would it take to do it? It's like I used to tell my guys when they were out there and they were failing a simple training session. They were having a hard time, let's say, with just simply shooting ILS approach. Here it is, we'd go 7-8 months without having any IFR. You know, and now we're doing our 6-month check, something like that, and you get the guys in the airplane, it's like, Jesus, we had to shoot 3 ILSs just to get you back on track again. Well, why is that? You know, you land every day at an airport that has an ILS approach to it. Why aren't you practicing it? You know, dial it in. Fly the approach. That is just as good as anything in this world is practice, because at least you're using that. Okay, so you come back, you've finished the load off, you've gone up to 500 feet, or at least got some altitude in you. Take the airplane, slow it down, see what it feels like. You know, because I guess the reality of it is you're so busy flying from point A to point B, dumping a load, taking it out, bringing it back. Is the aircraft rigged properly? I don't know, you pre-flighted it right. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily rigged 100% the way it should be. And so the only way you can tell sometimes is you're going to have to go up and say, well, okay, I'll go up to 1,500 feet and let's pull the end power back and see if we can get this thing to stall. And some of you might say, well, you don't want to stall that 502. You do that, you're in trouble. Well, okay, can you recognize a stall? Because you've been flying near the stall for so long. Okay, you know it gets greasy, you know it gets sloppy. You can move the control a lot, nothing happens to the airplane, you know you're getting close to the stall. So we push the nose down here and we add the throttle some more. Well, okay, that's, if you know that much, you're ahead of the game. But we got to practice this stuff, and you should be getting that level of proficiency so it's never an issue. Angle of attack not attained, we just talked about that a little bit. Performance not calculated. You know, one of the toughest things with ag operators is how many of you actually know that there's a performance chart for your airplane? When Air Tractor or any of these companies were putting them out and they had any sort of dash, any Part 23 basis, there had to be something for performance. Even in the old thrusters and even some of the older aircraft that were out there, if you look at the TCDS, it'll talk about basic performance of the aircraft. If you don't know what that is, please look it up. Directional control not attained. Surface speed and braking was another one. Well, I can't imagine you guys ever landing fast, braking hard, and pulling into the house to pick up another load. It just doesn't happen. I mean, you guys usually taxi for, what, 20 minutes every time you come in, right? So the trick is, though, are you totally familiar with that aircraft, and are you doing what's best for the performance of the aircraft? Are you putting a lot of stress on it? Maybe you shouldn't be. And some of the ouches that come in with that is when we talk a little bit about owner maintenance on some of these. We had an issue a while back with over-torqued landing gear bolts, and the gear came off on takeoff. The bolts were almost a 1/4 inch longer than what they were supposed to be because they were so over-torqued. You know, so some of these things we got to really be looking for. C-fit, controlled flight in terrain. Basically what it boils down to, nuts and bolts of it is that, we've had, as you guys probably all know, we had one where it took off in VFR and ended up hitting some IFR stuff, and the terrain was out there. It was more in front of him than it was below him. And so we just got to be careful on those kind of things. Aircraft control not attained, and then it ran it out of gas. The running out of gas? Yeah. Running it out of gas, they've had 3 of those incidents in Minnesota alone. And I bring that up because Minnesota's right across the border. So hopefully that, disease doesn't spread across into North Dakota. But, when's the last time you took the last load out and came back and only had 2 gallons of gas on board the airplane? Don't raise your hand. But we got to make sure that we're, keeping enough fuel in these airplanes to be flying them. Regulatory stuff, talk about mandatory calculation every flight. It's funny when they say this, every flight. Okay, so if you're flying the same 502 that you've been flying for the last 15 years, and at one point in your life you calculated performance, and at one point in your life you calculated weight and balance and performance for the aircraft, do you ever have to do it again? Well, probably not. According to the rule, no, because you've done it once. But those of you that have been around aircraft long enough know that an airplane always gets heavier as it gets older. For some reason, it does. It just happens. And things change. A lot of things change. 15 years ago, I didn't have this beer belly, and I was 75 pounds lighter. So with that said, then also it talks about every flight and every configuration. Okay? So I guess the point is here is if you haven't done a weight and balance on your aircraft lately, grab the TCDS, grab the AFM, take a look at it, just do some brief calculations. If you already knew what the answer was going to be, good for you. If you get surprised about it, I'll guarantee you'll never forget it the next time you go out to load the airplane. So with that, I'd like to bring up Andy. and I need to get you out of here. I already talked too much. Andy Tybert, as most everybody in the state knows by now, is that Andy had a little bit of a excursion off the runway. But he's also got some tips that he's going to bring to us on weight and balance, and this is stuff that's very important for you guys. So, Andy. You got the clicker? Oh, and how do you run it?
Just the bottom button will move your slides.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. My name is Andy Tybert, and I'm based out of Grafton. And normally I come to you and bring you some safety, safety and maintenance related items, and telling you how to take care of your airplane, add the right fuel, make sure all your paperwork's in order, show you some worn out stuff, broken stuff, and everything else. And I'd like to think that throughout these years, I don't know how many years I've been doing this presentation, but throughout the years, I'd like to say that I've been kind of practicing what I preach. Try to do the right thing and stuff like this. And one day in latter part of June of 2018, 8 o'clock in the evening, I just rolled out and powered up to what I thought was just going to be a normal takeoff. Nothing else going on. And my slides are not quite in order, but I'm gonna.
The ones you got to, so, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Hopefully those will work. That's the ones you got.
Yes, this will work here. I got to about the approaching the 3/4 point way on the runway, and this is where I'm normally lifting off. I'm like, what the heck's going on here? I'm still almost, still holding quite a bit of forward pressure on the stick just to keep the tail up. I'm going about 80 miles an hour down the runway. These things normally lift off right about 90, but it isn't accelerating the way I thought, and I felt I was too far down the runway to abort the takeoff. So at this point, I looked down and I noticed I was at about 1,500 foot-pounds of torque, which I normally power up to about 1,750. I'd actually cut back about 15 gallons from what I was carrying all day long. This is the cooler part of the day, and so I don't feel I've overloaded anything like that. I had about half fuel on board and stuff like this. So anyway, at that point, you got about half a second to make a decision. I elected to just push forward on the power lever, and from there, I don't know what happened to any engine parameters. I kind of had other stuff at hand, but from increasing the power lever to full power, and I immediately threw the dump handle, and the flap control on this airplane was on the stick, and rolled on full flaps. That airplane only had a 25-inch gate box on it. It seemed like it took forever to get that load off, but I actually, when I went past the end of the runway, through some grass, through a fence, a little fence that was not current anymore, but there was wire there and poles, but I went through that fence and got up to a little slew of cattails and kind of came to an abrupt stop. And long story short, I was trapped in that airplane for about an hour. It took me about 20 minutes to even get a call through to 911 operator, which I won't go into great detail on that, but it was about an hour before hour and 5 minutes before anyone responded there. And so here's just a picture. Is there a pointer on here?
Middle button.
Middle button. This is the airplane, and it actually flipped over and slid to a stop, and you can see there the cockpit was buried into the mud. When I came to rest, the water started to creep in and came up to about that level. All this mud and everything like that. When I slid a little bit sideways, so all this mud pushed inside of the cockpit on coming to rest. This slough, there's a hill, you know, it's like they took a backhoe and dug out each way and dug a cattle watering hole out here. This slough is right in the middle, or right in line with the runway I was departing from. Now what did I do? Which one? Oh.
No, it's just blank slide.
Oh, okay. This little white streak you see right there, that's actually where I finished dumping, and the cattails don't start till here. So I approached those completely empty, and still couldn't break ground. I was just about to the speed of dancing on the wheels, but still wouldn't go. Another farmer was flying around his Super Cub. He flies every morning around that area and checks cows, and he sent me this aerial picture. So you can see this picture is going this way, and you know, here's the way I was coming. When it started to hit the cattails, it nosed in right there, and that's where it ended up flipping. By the way, I'll make this, if you guys have any questions, any comments, anything about any of these slides I'm bringing up here, feel free to chime in here. This is a completely interactive session here. These two pictures here, where the power section twisted right in half and was completely submerged. There was only about 8 inches of one of the propeller blades sticking out of the water that I went through with a bunch of waders and wrapped a rope on and tugged them out of there. Of this whole incident, anybody recognize what this is? This is the battery, the right-hand battery box that's attached to the firewall. And when the aircraft hit, the engine mount buckled and the engine came back and hit the battery box. You can see in here, this is the vent cover of a Concorde battery, and you know, it popped that vent cover. But look at what it did right here. This is part of the battery box where the cable normally went through. That's the part that, out of all this entire accident, that really kind of looked back at and kind of scared me a little bit. This is where the cable normally goes through, and the grommet is on there, but it pinched the cable hard enough to go right to the copper. It actually penetrated the sheathing on the cable. The only reason that this thing didn't catch fire is that was the negative cable. If that would have been the positive cable, that would have been the ignition source for a fire in this, with me trapped inside. That's not a good deal. I guess that's all the slides I have on that wreck. Is any some of the things that went right about that thing? I guess number one is I was cognitive enough to throw the dump handle, get rid of any excess weight I had on board, and do whatever. The aircraft still did not lift off the ground, but if nothing else, at least I hit with that much less energy involved, and I felt that was a good deal. Seat belts were on, helmet was in place. In this whole incident or accident, I never did get injured at all. Not until the next day, trying to find my wallet in the mud. And I got a little cut on some plexiglass on my arm. So
I noticed that there was some brown mixed in with that mud.
This is true. We said that may not all be mud. I am so thankful to be here and telling you about this incident. I learned, I guess I learned in the fact that you know, things can happen. You're on a survival mode at this point. We're in an industry this is not uncommon. Yes, sir.
Andy, why did you take off? Why did
Why didn't it? At this point, we don't know. We don't know completely. The FAA, when they came out the following day to investigate this and things like that, and we went through, and obviously the streak on the runway was evident, and I was dumping, and there's no chemical in the slough. When the airplane flipped over, it maintained all of its fuel pretty much in the tank, and I mean, it leaked a little, but didn't lose a lot of fuel. Alls I know is it reduced power on the takeoff roll. I don't know completely why.
Still working on the fuel controller and all that with NTSB.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Some of Jay's colleagues out of the FAA office, mostly there was an ops guy and a maintenance guy that came out to meet me the following day and look at this. There again, I was very thankful to be able to talk to them and follow this sequence through step by step. But so there, that's a very valid question. One I was wondering also, and one of the guys out of the office was quite persistent on, he got a hold of somebody with Pratt & Whitney, and a representative from Pratt & Whitney came and sawed the engine off and basically looked at several components of it on site. Now, there's certain things like you look at a fuel control unit, and out in that farm, we didn't know if it ran. We don't know if a prop governor was performing the way that it should. So he looked at things there, and I think that is part of his report. But he took 5 components back, and they went back to Montreal and are still being evaluated at this point.
It's amazing on the impact. We can take a look at it. We can look at the stator vanes. We can look at the turbine itself, and we can tell pretty much how much power this thing is making when it actually stopped. So when that blade finally hit whatever it hit, just the destructive force of that engine, they've seen that often enough that they can tell how much power in a pretty good way that engine was making.
Not very much, because part of what he was, no, it's something.
Must be the end.
Some of what he was looking at on his initial inspection of this was even the curl of these blades. Now, just because they're curled, and the way all 3 of them are curled, he could tell that it went in under some power, but a greatly reduced amount. And even the following day, that power lever was still all the way forward. And that airplane empty. I know you guys have flown 502s empty, and they perform. They're fun when they run. So.
Yeah, it's amazing on the propellers what you can tell just by the impact and how the blade twists. Whether it twists to the side, just to the side, which means not much forward motion, but it just curls it. It might be curled and twisted backwards to show speed. There's a lot of different things we can tell by the actual twist of the blade. So.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah, I sent the loader kid home at 7:30. I had him mix up the last load. This was the last load of the day. Now, would this have happened? Had I shut down, and would this have happened the first load of tomorrow morning? Probably, if there's something mechanical there or something failed. On his initial inspection, just back to the airplane, all the fuel filters, even the fuel farm, all proved to be that the fuel supply was there, the fuel quantity was there. As far as delivery, they took some fuel pumps. Was there a high or a low pressure fuel pump, and that was one of the components they took back to evaluate its performance. So did that fail? I hear there's a line that if it cracks or if it's ruptured, they will go to flight idle. Different stuff like this. So did that line begin to rupture? How are you going to find that if it did rupture in that mess up there? I don't know, but something went wrong.
And we may never know.
And it might just be final might be undetermined cause, correct?
Previous load, everything was normal.
Everything all day long was normal. I'd been servicing out of that same fuel supply, for several weeks. It was not a recent addition. We might, if you had a tanker load unloading as you're nursing, you're correct. You'd suspect that, but it wasn't any recent addition to that tank. Been flying all day long. There was no previous vibrations, nothing abnormal whatsoever previous to this takeoff. But back to Mike's comment, I sent that loader home at 7:30 that night. And, I told him, mix up the last load, I'll take care of it, because he had quite a drive to go home. Sent him home, and no one was looking for me. There was one point there that I was fully prepared to spend the night there. As long as once I figured out that I wasn't on fire and wasn't sinking more. I didn't know how deep of a slough I really went into. So.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here to tell us about it.
Well, thank you.
Andy, were you able to get yourself all out on your own?
No, I did not. I got myself unbuckled and turned around in there. I keep saying I was there, I did it, but I couldn't tell you how. Because there was a lot of mud in there. I figured there was roughly 300 pounds of mud inside of there. I was not pinched, but I was pushed up against the other side of the cockpit, and there was mud everywhere. And when after things started to settle down and the water was creeping in, when I was sitting on the top of that canopy, I was just right to my rib cage in water. So, and I'll put a plug in for Samsung S8 phones. They're waterproof. Still the same phone, in fact. So.
That's cool. Well, very good. Thank you much. You got to get to a meeting, do you not?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to hold you anymore.
All right.
Thank you, Andy. Okay. So how much time we got here? Because I can shorten this up. We're good? Okay, I don't want to talk for 3 hours, so. We talk about from time to time that air tractor and a lot of the aircraft you guys fly were probably certificated under Part 23 or maybe CAM 8. I don't want to get in a CAM 8 debate with all of you today, certainly not that, because we need to find out more about that. But one of the things you can do, like for air tractor, is that over the years, a lot of different corporations around the country and flying different countries, like in this case Brazil, did work with air tractor to actually certificate the aircraft or get some kind of document, a supplement, that actually let them increase the gross weight of the aircraft. The only reason I'm telling you this is if you have that aircraft and you look at this document, even though it's not approved for your use, all it says is that you can increase the gross weight accordingly under CAM 8. Well, this is something you can go to and say, well, the FAA did this. So if they did that for Brazil, I could probably do it for my aircraft. Let's look at the data and see if it is something I can use. Just gives you one more tool, something more you can look at that might help you decide whether or not you can increase the gross weight in your aircraft. Some of the things they talked about in there were flight load limit factors, CG limits, operational crew, placarding, gross weight, overweight envelopes, operating procedures, and so forth. And all these things, when you look at it, are all part of CAM 8. So whenever you do a CAM 8 increase on the load of your aircraft and endorse it as the owner, you're going to have to be doing a lot of things that are up here on this list. How many of you train more than the required once every 2 years? Anybody? Nobody trains, but once every 2 years. How many of you have trained in the last 2 years? Well, a couple of you. How many of you have had a biennial flight review in the last 2 years? Okay, good. You all trained in the last 2 years. That's good. I don't have to worry about that. Let's think about this, though, is that a flight review, for all that it is just that. It's meant to be a look at how well you're doing at flying an airplane. Do you have any bad habits? Are you going to do something that's going to hurt yourself? That's what the instructor's there for. Realistically, all of us should be going to an instructor and saying, okay, let's see, I'm an ag operator. Last time I stalled an airplane was in 1964. Yeah, we should probably go out and stall an airplane. So let's see what that's like. Well, maybe we haven't done, I mean, what's the maximum wind you guys fly in? Anybody? 10, 15 knots maybe? If you're out Part 91, you might go, what, to 25, 30 knots? But usually if you're only flying ag aircraft, what, at 15 to 20, you might do some dry stuff above 15, things of that nature, right? But you're really, the point being is most of the time when you guys fly, you don't have a lot of crosswind because you're flying mostly when the winds are light, correct? So what true crosswind experience do you have? And I know you can say, well, I've been doing this for 47 years. I've been doing it for 40, and I'm sure if I hit the right wind, I'd probably go off the runway too. But the point being is that we really should go out and train and practice for some of this stuff just to see if we have any habits, things we need to pay attention to. And training is something that you can't get enough of it. You also take note for all of you that are NAAA members, is that that is one of their big things right now as far as the aircraft is training, knowledge and skill tests, things of that nature. They're really coming up with that, and the FAA is on board with it. Simply because we're trying to figure out a way to get training into more of your things to do every 2 years type thing. So, and again, you know most of this stuff, but it's there to correct your bad habits, to set performance goals. Now, performance goals is something that's like, okay, today I got a load, I got 400 gallons of chemical on board, I'm in my 502, what's my minimum speed? You ever thought of that? What's my minimum speed for climb out today? Well, I go out every day at 100 knots. Well, I'm sorry, is that your minimum speed? What's your maximum speed? Maybe I shouldn't go out at more than 120. Why? Because the climb's too shallow, because I got a tree I got to clear, because I got a house out there I got to stay about 500 feet above. But what I guess I'm looking for is when you go out, give yourself a goal when you're going out of there. Today I'm going to fly at 90 knots till I get to 500 feet. Well, it gives you the discipline necessary to fly a given airspeed or a given rate of climb that you're probably going to have to work at if you don't do that kind of thing on a regular basis. It's going to just make you work at it a little bit, I guess is what we're looking for. Train common scenarios in GA aircraft. You're all GA pilots as well as Part 137, airmen and commercial pilots in the ag aircraft. You know, go out and practice things that you don't normally do. Grab a 172, go out and practice emergency landings. You know, when's the last time you shut an engine off or reduced the power and did a power off landing to someplace? Now granted, when your hair's on fire at 120 knots and you're 3 feet off the deck, your options are pretty limited. But maybe you should go practice that once. And by that I simply mean have somebody sit, you know, if you're in a 172 and you're over the field, have them pull the power and just get used to the aircraft and suddenly setting it down without the power. Or for that matter, just go up to 1,000 feet and just set up a glide to the runway, or 500 feet or 200 feet. Okay? But if you haven't done anything like that in a long time, we'd like you to go out and practice it just simply because we need to remember how to do all that stuff. Review aircraft performance data, maintenance records. We still have an issue in the FSDA with maintenance records. We still have folks that are overflying annuals, ADs, certain inspections on the aircraft. It's still an issue. And that's because who does the maintenance? Generally not you. The airman usually takes it someplace and they do the maintenance. Or your boss does the maintenance and you just fly the airplane. And one of the things we'd like to consider is you know, it talks about reviewing past discrepancies in an aircraft you haven't flown. How many of you from time to time will go help out a buddy in his airplane? You ever done that? He's got an airplane and you're going to go over there and fly that airplane for him. Well, when you do that, if you do that, don't just take his word for it, the airplane's fine. Take a look at it. You know, maybe he's had an issue with the manifold pressure gauge for the last 2 months and they can't figure it out. Or maybe it's got a prop governor issue. Or maybe he's had a hot start issue he hasn't figured out yet. Might be something in that aircraft you should really know before you go firing a switch off. But just take a time to look at it. The other thing I want you to try to do is take time to look at the aircraft when it is torn down. You guys mostly getting your airplanes annual about now? Most of you? Now is the perfect time when it's at the maintenance shop to go over there and say, George, just leave the covers off and I want to take a look at this thing. Because what's the average time it takes you guys to do a pre-flight on an airplane? 10, 15 minutes maybe? You walk around, you test the fuel, you look at the battery, you make sure the covers are closed. You might move the stick a little bit and that's it. Well, what better time to take time to really find out what your airplane's all about than to grab a flashlight, a rag, and start really taking a look at that airplane. Sometimes the pre-flights I used to do, like on my Navajo, my King Air, things like that, I'd spend 2 hours in the shop. I had a flashlight out there, I was up in every cover. Oh, that's what that looks like. Well, it gives you a different view that the mechanic, I've even found things the mechanics missed. Not saying they're perfect, but and neither am I. But when you look up in there and all of a sudden you look at a pulley and that pulley's got a crack in it for a cable, you can go, hey George, you see this pulley in here? Oh, I haven't got that far yet. Well, take a look while I'm standing here. So that way you're actually getting to know that aircraft frontwards and backwards. It's not just something you're going to take for granted that it's been done. Take a look. We've had a lot of issues with cables put on incorrectly on trim tabs, backwards on ailerons, things of that nature. You know, when you do a complete re-rig and hook the wings back up after they've been off for a while, and a few other things, man, it's time to really take a look at what's going on with that airplane. And we've had those issues all the way across the country. So pre-flight when time is not an issue. I'm going to go through this part really fast. You guys are 137. You should know what the 137 regulations are. And so I'm not going to hit them too hard. Some of the things you need to come up with certification requirements. Aircraft, that's a big one. If you got some new airplanes this year, and new N numbers, and new registration, new airmen, new address, business names, all of that, make sure you're contacting the FSDO and give them time now. And I say that because I'll give you an example of what's happening to the office. You've all heard how the FAA is restructuring across the board. This is how far they've gone. Fargo is now doing aircraft certifications and actually operational certifications in Guam and Hawaii. They've got us going all over the world doing certifications. So it's no longer just North Dakota. So the days of saying, hey, I'll call the FSDO Wednesday, I'll be flying on Thursday, might not be there. So don't wait till the last minute to get that stuff done, because I'll tell you right now, the guys are not in the office nearly as much as they were in the past. They're changing a lot. If you've got a duration of the certificate, of course you know about that. Basically, till you die and surrender it, or we have to take it from you. We talked about this earlier with the unmanned stuff, but if you're not actually dispensing chemical, you're actually under Part 91, not 137. It's only when the handle's pulled and you're actually putting chemicals out, or you're turning around at the field. So I guess I look at it this way: you're required to do scene assessment, that's 137. Actual spraying operations, 137. So aircraft requirements, suitable and properly installed seat belts. Andy's brought this up in the past. We've had, and this was last year mainly, we haven't seen it this year, but we have seen where seat belts were torn loose inside after the accident. Mainly due to frayed or degraded seat belts. So we brought this up before. Please make sure you're looking at your seat belts. Take a look at them. If they look faded or frayed at all, maybe it's time to dig out the $900 package and replace them. And this is just one shot. Actually, the seat belt itself actually tore through the metal there on the impact. Okay, so certificates have all got to be available for inspection. You know that. So they don't necessarily have to be in the aircraft, especially the operating certificates for the aircraft. Copies have to be in the aircraft. Personnel, supervisors require special training. Make sure they've got that. If you're going to put in a chief supervisor this year for training, they're going to have to take a knowledge and skill, if they haven't already had one from the FAA. That designation is also required to be reported. Demonstration, conduct a knowledge and skill. This is where it says, where it actually has a chief supervisor who has a letter of competency. Come back here, where to go? Letter of competency or logbook entry. Come on, there we go. or logbook entry or endorsement may administer tests. So they've got to have that FAA endorsement. Safety belts, we've already talked about that, shoulder harnesses. I saw this photograph here. This is kind of a wicked looking thing, huh? I think he's ready for mosquitoes. I really do. Pretty awesome. Okay, operating rules, non-observance of airport traffic patterns. I bring this up every year for one reason. Again, if you're going to be doing the non-observance of the traffic pattern, remember it has to be in agreement with the airport authority for each airport you go into. You can do it with a handshake. That's all the rule says. Just make sure that if the FSDO comes up and talks to you, that you have a way to get rid of that, or a way to get a hold of the person that you shook the hands with that said you could do that. For that, what I'd really like you to do in preference to that is put it in writing somehow. We have developed a memorandum of understanding. We've got, I think I might have some copies with. If not, certainly got it electronic. I can send it out to you. Make copies, as many as you need. But certainly, if you can, get it in writing on the MOUs. This is kind of what it looks like. And again, what happened with this is way back when Larry was still in the aeronautics. And I first got in the FSDO up here with my ag guys because we had a couple issues with folks that were basically turned in for flying right traffic and didn't have the approval. So we developed this. This has actually gone through FAA legal, and they just said, okay, but we can't have anything to do with this. So this is not an FAA document, but it's just a way that they agree will cover the compliance with the non-standard pattern for the inspectors to allow it. Dispensing ops, we talked about that. The OPSS letters, the approval letters, the op specs, basically there's about, anywhere from 6 to 7 pages. Make sure you go through those. Make sure the dates, the names, businesses, all that stuff's good. So let's see here. Congested areas. Yeah, I thought that was a pretty wicked shot. I think he got the fire out. They showed they show the photograph after he got done dumping that load of water. There was nothing left of that semi. It completely leveled it. They got the fire out, but this is one of those deals where they got a fire in the middle of the tundra up in Canada or Alaska or someplace. They had no way to get to it, and the guy says, "I'll be right there." So it just would really be fun to see that in real life. That is really something. Okay, so and keep in mind your directed energy when you're out there flying on stuff. I mean, we still get occasionally complaint calls because a sprayer flew right at the interstate or right at a highway. And I know you can't stay away from everybody because you can look one minute and the next minute there's a car sitting right in front of you and you were trying to avoid it. Just be careful of the interstates and highways that you're not overflying those when you're doing your runs. Okay, so over congested areas, basically 1/2 the aircraft's maximum authorized load. So basically it's talking about the aircraft has to have 100-hour inspection and so forth. Didn't you fly over congested areas? Any of you guys doing mosquito stuff or anything like that? No? Okay. If you do, just call the FSDO if you're not sure, or you can go to FSIMS and you can look it up. Let's see, business names we talked about. Records, you got to have those for a minimum period of time. 12 months, got to have them in your file. Change of address, if you had any kind of change. Termination of your operations, make sure you let the FSDO know. And FSDO concerns comes up with the web ops and not seeing the documents changed. In other words, they found an aircraft sitting on the ramp that you're using which wasn't listed. So I'm going to kind of just bump through these pretty fast here. This page is an itemized list of authorizations that you have. But again, owner, operator, that information, and so forth. So, public inquiry, we still get a call. Every once in a while we get a call on this as to what time's legally loggable by the ag industry or ag pilots. Keep in mind that it has to be a landing or a takeoff and a landing from separate airports to be qualified as a cross country. So if you're relocating to a grass strip out somewhere or landing on a dirt road, and doesn't matter if it's 2 miles or 5 miles from the airport of where you took off, it's cross country, believe it or not. Now, whether it's legal to use it or not for furtherance of a rating, no. It has to qualify by being more than that 50 nautical miles. So, and one other thing, just remember for every takeoff there must be a landing. seen that in logbooks where it says takeoffs like 3,417, landings 3,416. You know, what happened to that number? So, UAS stuff and NAAA, they still have those phone numbers, are still working. And let's see here. What do we got? English proficiency. We still have, you guys still seeing issues with UND pilots out there that you can't understand? It's getting less, isn't it? They're doing a lot more for it. They really are. UND actually has one of the best records in the country right here in North Dakota. We had an English proficiency, we still have a serious English proficiency issue down in Scottsdale and places like that, and the reason for it is we're seeing a very high influx of students coming from foreign countries that do not require that their students actually go through an English speaking course before they get here. And so they are doing a lot more with it. If you hear something like that, if you hear something that's totally unintelligible, call the FSDO. But what we're going to need from you is the end number of the aircraft and the basic time of day and location. So if you can give us those three things, then we are required under our new statutes to go out and look at them and find out who they were flying for and how we can get that fixed. So, Data Assurance Group, this is their phone number up there. The Data Assurance Group just got started up, I think it was about 3 years ago. Their job basically is to link you to everybody that you need to talk to as far as, you know, I was looking at a chart, and this is a perfect example. Minnesota had an airport that showed on the sectional charts on the right side of the highway, but the airport was on the left side. Just stupid things like that. It's like, how could you screw that up? The airport's on the left side of the runway as you're going eastbound. But no, on the chart it's on the right side. So when you see stuff like that, if you see chart issues or see anything in ForeFlight or any of this stuff, let us know. Give us a call. We'll take a look at the data and we'll make sure it gets fixed. We're getting closer. The FSDO is getting closer to the completion of our new structure, and then drone surveillance is on its way. There's a lot more, and we talked about that a little bit. The WINGS program, I didn't cover that in its entirety or very much at all, really, but the WINGS program is still out there. We still have the safety meetings going on around. We now have drone pros. Brad Stringlin here in Bismarck is actually our WINGS pro. Al Scramstead out of Fargo is actually our drone pro. If you know somebody locally that knows a lot about drones, have them give me a call, because I'm looking for a pro that can answer questions. And that's basically it. Any questions for me? Or anybody? Nothing? Just crickets. Must be the end of the day. Well, thank you very much for giving me your time.
Thank you, Jay. Perfect. I guess just a couple things at the end here. I just want to thank everybody for coming and being in attendance here. For those online, thank you for watching. Make sure you fill out the questionnaire at the end so we can make sure you get credit for watching the video online. Tonight we have the social at the Bismarck Country Club. I think it's starting at 5 o'clock. Is that right, Mike? So 5 to 9. So I hope you can come there tonight. Passport awards are going to be handed out. So I hope you can make it. I hope you can stay for the rest of the Upper Midwest Aviation Symposium throughout this week. Tuesday night, Aero Applicators community's very own Ryan Rao is getting inducted into the Aviation Hall of Fame. So I hope you guys can make that to that event on Tuesday night. If you have any issues throughout the year, feel free to contact myself. Obviously, the FSDO office is there for issues as well, but I'd love to hear what's happening out there, if there's anything that we can do to help with those situations. And with that, I just want to end, and I want to hope all of you have an exciting and fun and safe spring season here in 2019. So thank you so much for coming.